All right, so today we are going to be installing this. This is the Sigeyi AXO power meter. It is a spider-based power meter, and I'm going to be installing it on my new to me, Cervelo R5. Now, this company is a lesser known brand in the power meter space, and they specifically design these spider-based power meters, and they have power meters for basically any platform. Now, this one is specifically for my Cervelo R5, which is running the Rotor 3D crankset, and I'm going to install it and kind of report back over the next couple of weeks and compare it to the SRM that I have on my TT bike. Now, a couple disclaimers to get out of the way first. I have no relationship with the company Sigeyi. This video is not sponsored in any way. I did pay full price for this item, and the biggest disclaimer, I am not a bike mechanic, so y'all are kind of just along for the ride with me on this one. Let's get it going. All right, so we're getting started here. First thing I'm doing is removing the chain. You can technically leave the chain on, but I prefer to remove it. Luckily, this chain is equipped with a quick link. Most modern chains are, and once you have the quick link pliers, it's a really easy process to remove the chain. Just snapping off that quick link, and off it comes. Then we have to remove the exterior pressure cap using an 8mm Allen key and a torque wrench. I find it easiest to just kind of hold the torque wrench steady and then use the crankset itself and the crank arms to apply enough pressure to loosen it. After that, you can just remove it by hand. After that, we have to remove the interior nut, which uses a typical Shimano cassette tool, and same thing, just holding tight on the tool and using the cranks themselves to apply enough pressure to loosen it, and then removing it by hand. And once those pieces are out, we actually have to reinstall them in the inverse order. So I start with that exterior pressure cap, and as you can see, I don't even bother using the torque wrench, just using the 8mm Allen key and hand tight will totally suffice. After that, we install the extracting nut, which has been flipped 180, so the splines are actually facing away from the frame. And with this, it's the same thing, just hand tight is totally fine. Once those are in there, we switch back to the torque wrench with the 8mm Allen key, and I brace against the opposite crank arm, and then apply pressure slowly as that pressure cap pushes against the extracting nut and starts to pull the chain rings and crank arm away from the rest of the crankset. And after a little bit of work, eventually it will pop right off. And there she goes. Once the crankset is removed, I just go and switch over to the workbench and once again remove that extracting nut along with that exterior pressure plate, which should just fall right out. From here, we move on to the chainring bolts, which I believe is like M5, M4 Allen keys, not sure the exact measurements here, but they should not be under any extreme amount of pressure. I think it's like 6-7 Newton meters, very light. I do think I kind of overcomplicate this process just a bit. This comes back to me not being a bike mechanic specifically, just recreationally going about this. But as you can see, I use my ratchet to loosen them to a certain point, and then after that I remove that Allen key from the ratchet and remove them completely by hand. Once all of the chainring bolts have been removed, everything should just come apart really easily. Now, obviously you want to make sure you hang on to those chainring bolts because they will be needed for the installation of the power meter when we put everything back together. For the reinstallation, I find it's easy to just kind of work in the opposite direction. So I put the large chainring face down, put the power meter on top of that face down, make sure we're lining up the holes. And then there's a specific way the smaller chainring needs to be placed. So as you can see, the rotor and there's a little line of text on the outer side that says that particular side of that chainring needs to be facing the frame. So make sure that's lined up in the proper way. Otherwise, you will not get a clean shift between your large and small chainrings. Now, basically what I do is I put in one of those chainring bolts and then line everything back up and continue to install the rest of those bolts. Now with these, as you can see, I am just going hand tight first. Basically, just like with a car wheel, you want to install hand tight first, so that way you can get your specific torque without over tightening one side and creating an offset. Now, these, like I said before, are about 6 to 7 Newton meters for your actual torque spec, which you don't really need a torque wrench for. As you can see, I'm just holding the head of the ratchet, and then I just go to a medium tightness because these are really easy to strip, so you don't want to over tighten. And that is the process. Pretty straightforward. All right, so I've arrived at a slight impasse. I have the power meter installed onto the chainrings. However, Cervelo and Rotor use a proprietary lock nut on the crank arm, which I don't have the tool for. And because I'm probably only gonna do this job once, I can't necessarily justify buying it. So I'm actually gonna make a trip to my local bike shop and hopefully they can help me finish the job. All right, so some time has passed and things took a bit of a turn, so let's talk about it. So the eagle-eyed viewers out there might notice that this is not the Sigeyi power meter with the 3D rotor chainrings. See, what had happened was, so I realized I made a bit of a mistake. When I ordered the Sigeyi power meter, I thought it was for the entire 3D platform, being 3D Plus, 3DF, basically all of the 30mm AXO variants of the Rotor 3D crankset, but it was actually for 3D 24. So seeing as I had the beginning of the season coming up and I needed a power meter in order to train properly and race properly and use that data to go about the season as best as possible, I needed to make some changes. So let me explain what I did. I had to improvise a little bit. And what I did was I went with a completely different setup. I went onto Facebook Marketplace, I found a Dura Ace chainring set. I ordered the Power 2 Max power meter for those Dura Ace chainrings, which basically makes this the most pointless video possible. Well, can't win them all, I guess.